Hello, everybody, again. So this is a continuation of a previous video that I did, starting out with a lot of my classes. A lot of the work that we do is going to be using virtualization. So VMware Workstation, VMware Fusion. And in this course, or this explanation, which can be used for many of my courses, I'm going to explain how to obtain a Kali Linux VM, pre-made VM, how to import it into VMware, and use it. So it can be used for a lot of different things. It can be used for Python. It can be used for my hacking classes. It can be used for many of the classes that I do. So I'm going to do a tutorial here today on how to set up that VM and how to do a little bit of Python at it. So it'll be very helpful for my Python students. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen. All right. And, I do a lot of stuff from Google. So just do a Google search on download Kali Linux. All right. And I'll take you to the Get Kali link. And for the purposes of this, we're going to put it on easy mode. We're going to grab a virtual machine. All right, so click on that and then just get your architecture. So if you are using VMware or VirtualBox or Hyper-V, whatever virtualization you're using, I have been doing the explanation from VMware, but I know some of you are more power users. You might be using VirtualBox. Just make sure you get the right architecture. Okay, and I'm going to just grab the one here in the upper left, and it will start downloading. You'll see here in a zip file. You need to make sure you have a application that will unzip it. Some operating systems, like Mac, is really good about it. The operating system will unzip it. Linux will too. If you're a Windows user, you might need WinRAR or another compression application. So I'll be back when this finishes. It's going to finish here in about 20 seconds. While that's doing that, I'll give you a little bit of an idea of where I keep all my virtual machines. So I put all my virtual machines under my documents. Then I'll have a folder here for virtual machines. And this is where I keep all of my virtual machines and my ISOs that I use for the different classes, different projects, etc. So that would have dropped into my downloads. There it is. I'm just going to cut that and go back to my documents, my virtual machines folder. You can put this wherever you want, but I just try to keep everything, organized here. And once you have that zip file in its final destination, you can right click and say extract here. Okay, and again, I'm using WinRAR as a compression utility. There are a lot of different compression utilities, WinZip, 7-zip, etc. Whichever one works best for you, it'll do the same thing. Okay. Almost done. Oh, it still says it has 0 time left. There's a lot of VMDK files it has to unzip. They keep updating this VM constantly, so here I'm at the end of the quarter, end of quarter 2, so it's probably going to be really big. There we go. So that will unzip that here into a folder called Kali 2024-2. All right, should have. There it is. So it'll be the same name as the as the file. I am just going to rename the folder to something a little bit more comprehensive. Kali Linux for coastline. All right, something simple so we can recognize it. All right, once you do that, you can go back to VMware, open up VMware, right, after you've got it installed. And to get access to that VM, you go File, Open. And then you're just going to find that folder. Again, mine was under Documents, Virtual Machines. I named it Kali Linux for Coastline. And then that file, that VMDK file that pops up, you're just going to highlight and click Open. Okay, and it'll pop up in there, right? Again, you can rename it here as well. So you can go in here and single click. Is it going to let me? There you go. Rename. Right click and rename. So I'm just going to rename it Kali Linux. I'll let the version and then Coastline. So I know what it's for. And then from there, you just need to start it. Now, what you can do before we start it, let me just back up a second. Look at what resources it's using. Okay. Understand the resources that you have on your own system. Like I have a pretty beefy gaming desktop. I have plenty of RAM, plenty of processor, plenty of disk space. It's going to require 80 gigs of disk space. It is going to require 4 processors. That's a lot. Now, you can par this down. If your system does not have that much processing power, so you're only working with a quad-core system, you can click on processors and par it down to say like 1 and 2. Right, so use 1 core with 2 processors per core, right? Memory, keep it at 2 gigs. If you have 2 gigs, say you only have an 8 gig system, you can get by with 2 gigs, right? If you have 16, you definitely can get by with 2 gigs. If you have a really beefy system like me, I have 48 gigs. I'm going to bump this up, actually. I'm going to bump it up to 4 gigs. It'll run a lot faster. So the more memory you can give the VM, the better off you'll be. Again, know your system, know your processor, know the amount of RAM you have, know the amount of free disk space. Everything else can stay the same. Auto detect, present, NAT, etc. That's all you need to know for now. So, know how much RAM you can give it. You can go down to about 1 gig and be just fine. Especially if you only have like a 4 gig machine. But, no fewer than 2 processors, etc. I'm going to bump mine back up to 2 and 2 because I can support that. I'm going to click OK. All right. And now once I have that all squared away, I'm going to hit power on. Click enter. And the default username and password for this guy is Kali. Kali for the username, Kali. Kali for the password, Kali. Okay. And there you have it. There's your desktop for Kali Linux. Now, a little bonus here for my Python students. I like to code in Kali Linux. I like to code in any Linux. I don't like using compilers because compilers are great tools for just starting out learning. But the faster you can get off of them and into a operating system environment, I think the better off you're going to be. You can first off look and see make sure Python is installed. So you can do Python, right, dash version. All right, and you see that I'm running Python 3.11.9. Good, we want to be running Python 3.11. So no further installs. You don't have to do any updates. You can just go straight from here. All right. So to code in Python on Linux, first off, what I suggest you do is you work from the desktop. So let's just see what directory you're in. So the command in Linux for seeing what directory you are in is pwd. So it says I'm in home Kali. And if I do a ls, which will list my directories and files, you can see all the directories and files under home Kali. So I want to be on the desktop. So I'm going to change my directory to desktop. Now, I'm not giving it the full directory name. I'm just telling it where I want to go since I'm in, it recognizes that it's there. So now I'm in desktop. So if I type in PWD again, current working directory, I'm in home Kali desktop. So I am here, right? If I ls that, you can see that I have no files or anything in here. These are not going to show up. These are just shortcuts. All right. So if I come over here and I want to create a new file, I'm going to just use my text editor, my mouse pad, right? I can start coding from here. So I can type in start bin bash shebang. I'm sorry, missed one. There we go. Shebang bin bash, and I can start uh, coding. So this would actually be a bash file that I'd be creating, not a Python file. 1 second. So if you wanted to do a Python script, you would make the shebang user bin Python. That just so it can reference it. Actually, Python 3. And then start coding whatever you're going to code in there. So for example, in the first homework, I give that as the code, right? Right. And then to save it as a Python script, I would just use a save as. But first off, I need to download this, turn it into a tutorial for the assignment for assignment 1. I need to grab the files that I need for it. All right. So I'll download those. Let me grab them out of downloads. And one thing that I love about VMware that you will not get this in, you may or may not get it in VirtualBox, is that you can drag and drop files. All right. So I have the Megamart sales and Megamart new sales. So if it's not gonna allow me to do that. Okay. So here's a trickery with that. VMware needs to use VMware tools. So I go here and right click onto the VM that's running. It's not going to allow me to use VMware tools. Interesting. Oh, there it goes. It's going to let me drag and drop them. Interesting. All right, it should allow you to drag and drop it from your host operating system to your VMware. So you notice that I have the Megamart sales and Megamart new sales here that correspond with these. And then all I have to do is save this file, save as, and give it a name. So I'm just going to name it what I asked to name it in the, oops, you know what? Cancel. I missed something. Missed something very important. I have to import. I have to import a couple of very important libraries, but I might not have those libraries. So I need to install them. So if you have to install a library in Python, you use pip. All right. Install numpy, and it says it's already installed. Already satisfied. Numpy's already installed. So then if I want to, I can do pip for panda, pandas. It's already satisfied. All right, so they're already there. Great. So again, something you don't have to worry about with using Kali Linux. So we just need to import them into the program. Give them a variable name, pandas as PD. All right, there we go. Now we can save as. And I'm just going to call this combine .py. I'm going to save it to my desktop. Combine.py. And I don't know why, but window wants to be funky. And save. And there's combine.py. Now I'm gonna, and as you can see, it changes it. So changed it from a text file to a Python file. And then you have all the color coding that goes along with that. So let me clear out of there. Now I can clear that. And then to run a Python program, it's just Python 3 space the file name. Now, two things to be very important. The file that I'm running, I'm in the same directory. I'm in desktop, and the file, if it uses any files, they are in the same directory as well. Okay, just makes things a lot simpler. Boom. There you have it. It merged those files together into one CSV file, right? And you know it's right when it has 69 lines, because it basically took the new sales information, the old sales information, and combined them into one file. All right, cool. So that's it, folks. As easy as it gets, and with using Python in Kali Linux. The downside, it's embedded in compiler, but not with any help libraries per se. You'll get very, very limited. If I had a problem with that file running, I'm just going to get whatever error messages Python is going to throw at me. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. But with the compilers like PyCharm and Atom and the other online compilers that you might find, they're a lot more intuitive and good for beginners. But when you get out into the industry, you'll be doing most of your coding from a Linux distribution. Not necessarily Kali Linux, but from like Ubuntu or Debian or Red Hat, etc. You'll be doing a lot of it there. Okay, so hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you very much. We'll see you next time.